May the Lord bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts. I'd like to start with a moment of silence. Our nation has had a particularly tough Friday and Saturday. Death, anger, groups hating each other. Let's just pray for a moment. Amen. I thought it was particularly important to put that prayer in because, unfortunately, I tend to give funny sermons. So, this one starts out, I have a bad cat named Onyx. He's very cute, but he is very bad. You see, there are rules in a civil household. When to be up, when to be asleep, and certainly when not to be meowing loudly. What not to break, what shelves not to climb on, and what plant pots not to dig up. In this case, no plant pots. But my cat does not follow these rules, although he seems to understand what they are. We can tell from the way the rules are broken, sometimes with stealth, sometimes in a guilty manner, and sometimes defiantly as he pushes the glass off the edge of the table, looking at us the whole time. And my cat breaks these rules because he is the center of his universe. For him, the rules are things to be dodged at best, held to when it is convenient or when the threat of punishment looms large. So I try to make it convenient for him to follow the rules. I put rocks in the top of the plant pots so they're less convenient to dig in. I set it up so he can have access to our balcony in the wee hours so he doesn't wake us up to go out there. And so he finds the next way to break the rules because the rules are outside of him and he is a very self-centered animal. And rules are difficult. There can always be reasons for breaking the rules, reasons that may be valid, but mostly for good rules, reasons that are not. Moses brought us 10 simple rules from God, rules you'd think we could mostly follow, and we quite often fail at following them to this day. The Hebrews and the Jewish people that they grew into also had a lot of trouble with these rules. Certainly there should be exceptions and allowances. Certainly there should be easy ways to follow the rules. And because humans love to make rules for other people, certainly there should be more rules, rules that control this person or that person when they do things I don't like. So the teachers of our ancestors in faith, the Jewish people, got to work over the centuries and made up codicils and interpretations and improvements to the commandments till there was a great body of rules and directives for living as a person of God. Some of these did make it easier for people to follow the rules, and many did not. And the Jewish people, like us, were good and faithful people. They wanted to obey God, and they wanted God to write his rules on their hearts, so they would fail less often. They put a little strip of paper with the commandments into a small niche in their door frames. They sometimes bound copies of the Torah to their arm or to their forehead to remind themselves of what they were supposed to be doing. And I'm not picking on the Jews. I respect these efforts and the passion and devotion behind them. We do similar things with the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm and the other touchstones of our devotion that bring us closer to God. And we also spend much time thinking our way around our rules and commandments and finding ways to not love the folks who perhaps need our love most of all. And we take lessons and judgment from the commandments and their reasonable extensions, which is good, how we should treat and care and respect others. But we pick up and put down the scales of justice as it suits us. Justice is supposed to be blind, but we are continuously peeking under the blindfold. Justice is for this group, but not for that. Fair means one thing for this person, but when I look at this person, maybe not so much. And especially when an interpretation favors our personal point of view, Well, that's how we choose to see things. And so we find another reason to dig up the plant pots that tempt us so much. To the lessons. Joseph, we're told, was a snitch. His brothers were out, perhaps having a wee dram, and roasting a bit of mutton that had accidentally fallen into the fire. And Joseph saw this, and he told on them. Additionally, and unhelpfully, Joseph's father loved him best, and this tweaked his elder brothers. They knew it, and they felt a bit put out at the special care that Joseph, this young snitch, was getting. And to make it worse, Joseph had dreamed dreams in which he found himself in a position of great authority over his brothers, and they heard about these dreams. To the brothers, they had to look like Joseph was on a path to upend the traditional hierarchy of the family. Usually, younger brothers end up with no inheritance, working for the older brothers, and then seeking their fortune in the world. But here was Joseph making them all look bad by pointing out their crimes, favorite of their father, and dreaming of stepping in front of all of them. And it could have happened that way. Their father, the head of the household, could choose to elevate Joseph above all of them, taking away their expected positions and potentially their livelihoods. And suddenly, all those rules and interpretations became inconvenient. The brothers began to plot against their younger brother, who ended up sold into slavery and reported as killed by a beast to their father. So in the story, the brothers dodged breaking the commandment not to murder, but which plant pots did they dig up? What commandments did they break? Anyone? Come on. False witness. Anything else? That's right. That's right. They stole Joseph's freedom. They lied about it. And before that, they were jealous of the favor their brother had stolen from their father, perhaps in their view. They also failed to honor their father. They mistrusted his judgment and were not willing to accept the possible outcomes of him exercising his authority. To me, the Ten Commandments and their interpretations are very interesting. It's interesting how they interlock with each other, how often breaking one leads to or even requires breaking another. If the brothers had respected their own brother's property rights to his own person, if they hadn't been willing to steal and sell him into slavery, they could not have imprisoned him. They could not have sold him to the Ishmaelites. If they had not let themselves be jealous of his fancy robe and the favor his father showed them, they would not have looked for a way to harm him. And if they had respected their father and his authority, they would have trusted him to do what was right by all of them and not look to subvert his authority by taking away one of his sons. Another interesting thing about the Ten Commandments is that they are negative directives. They are what not to do. What's more, once you get past the first two, they aren't obviously about our relationship with God. They're about how we treat each other. These are commandments to a people who are meant to be mostly free to choose their paths in life. Just avoid these things and stuff will go smoother. These are commandments from a God who loves us and who finds it his good pleasure to give us the kingdom. But there is always another plant pot, and the dirt is so tempting. And so we sin. If we think about it, then we confess the sin, and we look to atone it if we can. And God forgives us over and over again. But I think the lessons today and the teachings of Christ point to a different way. Not that confessing and forgiveness are bad, but rather what we can do with our freedom. With the freedom of action we have through the commandments and the freedom from judgment that we are granted by the love of God through his forgiveness. Matthew asks us to build up treasure in heaven because where our treasure is, that's where our heart will be. Paul cautions us not to worry about heaven and hell, but to focus on what is in our hearts and what is in our lips. I suggest these are both different angles on the great commandment of Christ, that we love each other. Looking for God in heaven where we are not is impossible. If we find God and a way of more closely living like He would have us live, it must be not by focusing on our own basic desires, not by focusing on the next tempting plant pod, but by using our brains for something besides rationalizing how to get what we want. I tell you that if with patient, thoughtful, forgiving love, we look for God's Spirit in each other, respecting each other's dignity and personhood, and striving for justice for all, we can find God's Spirit here in our love for each other. May God bless us all with just minds, warm hearts, kind lips, and helpful hands. Amen.